SharePoint in action. So what I really wanted to go through here is, in terms of SharePoint, is a lot of demos that you kind of get. I'm just going to move my window over so I can see you guys. What you kind of get is most of the singing and dancing from SharePoint. Really what I want to show is maybe some of the gotchas and maybe some of the best practices that you want to watch out for when you are using SharePoint, or maybe when you're building SharePoint out. And then maybe some websites that can give you some pre-made templates, like Lookbook can really kick your SharePoint off from the bat without having to think about creating a whole new SharePoint from scratch. Microsoft Lookbook. So effectively what this is a website that you can go to Microsoft, and it gives you some default templates that you can use to initially deploy to your SharePoint page, to really take it from a document library or a document store and really turn it into an intranet. So you can put a lot of static information on there. You can have links to other websites that you might use. You know, you can really take it from being a plain old boring couple of buttons to really take it to the next level, have sub pages. You know, you could even, if you wanted to, you can even kick your whole handbook into there. Now, the nice thing about this is there's loads of preset templates. You've got organizational level wide. If you're big enough and you do have individual departments, they do have some templates for some departmental ones, team, community solutions, and schools. Now, the nice thing is you can actually deploy these straight from this website. So you can see I've got add to tenant here, but there's actually an alternative way of doing this as well. So if I jump into this tab, I can actually go ahead and deploy the template straight from here. So if I went to create a new site, show the community site, you can see I've got some pre-made templates here. So you don't have to use the website. There's many ways you can do this. I'm a big fan of Volunteer Center just because I like the layout of it, which is really, really nice. And once you deploy that, it actually looks like this. So you can see you've got a nice pre-made template, loads of sample content on here, of course. So you really, what you need to have internally is you need to have a SharePoint champion who's going to come in and really take advantage of these elements. If you did end up with a default site which was a little bit plain, what you can also do, another way, is you can go into here and you can go apply a site template. So there's the third way that you can then also go ahead and get those templates applied, which is really, really nice. So usually when you get a site, be it any old site, and I can probably demo some of this. So if I jump onto one of these, normally what happens is you get what's called a default document library. Now, it's not recommended that you use this. It's not recommended you use this default document library. And there's some reasons around this. One, you've got some limitations when it comes to document libraries. When you try and put all your documents in here, they'll grow very, very fast. And what happens is they'll actually cause some sync issues, because you've actually got about a 300,000 item limit before then, you start getting out of the best performance ratios for the actual sync agent. So ideally, what you want to do here is you actually want to get these broken out into their own individual document libraries. And you can base that on maybe department, you can base that maybe on projects that you might be doing, but definitely get away from using the default one here. The other big thing is when you come to modifying a site like this, and let's say you want to start pushing your own assets into it, your own photos, your community photos, whatever you might have, when you upload them into SharePoint as part of these web paths, they fall directly into the default document library instead of going into the assets folder, which we'll find in site contents. So definitely don't use the default document library, get that deleted and start creating your own very intentional document libraries going forward. And you definitely want to split your data up. So you want to make sure your data is appropriately split up to reduce down on those sync issues. One previous question I did have actually in terms of deploying SharePoint is, do you go for one single SharePoint site, or do you have sub-sites? Do you use sub-sites as well as the default one? Now, I think the answer to that really is how big are you? How big are your departments? Does your department need a separate site? If you're a 5-person charity, I would argue not. I would say the ease of navigation with having one single pane and then having a navigational elements within that, say to a page and into a document library, is a lot easier for the users than having to jump through multiple team sites to get to the same data. But on the other hand, if each department has 5, 10, 15 people each, and they have their own external links, their own documentation, then yes, you might want to look at having subsites on maybe a hub and spoke format. So what I'll do is, I've got some Microsoft links here that sort of denotes why you shouldn't, one in terms of structure. So what I'll do is I'll paste those into the chat for you. So you've got these, you can have a look. They're a little bit technical. So I'm just going to expand this out so I can get it into the chat. So this one is for the structure. So you have a little read of that and you can sort of figure out what your structure is and how that would best suit you. The next one I'll paste in is why you don't want to use default document libraries. Again, one, when you sync down your data, when you have that shown in your file explorer, it's just going to show your site name -documents. Now that's not very good when you're navigating around or when new people starts. It's much better if it would be team site -HR documents, team site -finance documents, team site -finance documents. And again, you're then breaking all that data up to reduce down on those sync errors. So what I'll do is I'll just paste another little link in there for you so you can have a little read of that. So just get that one in there. Sorry about the technicals, I'm going to have to rush it ever so slightly. The other thing that you might not be aware of is illegal characters. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the sharing screen. Hopefully it doesn't break again to the full desktop. I'm just going to jump into here. When you create new documents, there is actually limitations on the names that you can use in terms of the characters. Lucky for us, they're very familiar to Windows. So you can kind of see those would be the character names that you can't use. The other thing that you can't do, and this is a little gotcha that people don't realize, is you can't have a folder called forms on the root of the document library. So if I put that in there, we should get a red X in a moment, because that's actually a hidden folder on the root of any document libraries. So that's you have to go ahead and change that to something like project forms, for argument's sake, which would then be a valid folder name. So a nice little gotcha there, just in case you run into that problem. You know it's not fixable, you just can't have the folder forms. Next one, this is a really good gotcha, this one, long paths. So within SharePoint, I'm just going to change the pane to my other one. Within SharePoint, there is a 400 character limit within the web browser. Unfortunately, on Windows, there's only a 255 character limit. And what this does is it creates like a little gotcha where you can ultimately create folders in here, but when you come to modify and change the folders within your file explorer, they then error out. And a good example of this is if I jump down, I've got loads of folders. I can keep going. Is this kind of area here. So what you can see is if I create a new file and I'll put some Ipsen Lipsen into it if I can find, let me see if I can get this. I'll just give it a new name like this and I'll try and save it. So if I open it up, what you'll find is, you see where it's kind of, I can't change the name on it. So if I try and change the format, so I'm like, okay, I'll change the format and I'll put it as a docx. I'll save that. It doesn't allow me to save. It doesn't pick up the location that is in SharePoint, and it doesn't allow me to change the names, but it does allow me to do it when I'm in here. So the key here is that you got to think about your structure, your folder structure, that it doesn't go too deep within the SharePoint site, and actually, and this would actually apply for both file names as well. So I've seen file names that are effectively the first paragraph of that file. Obviously that's no good, because you will run to this type of impact. And what this actually has is this actually has a knock-on effect to your sync agent. So actually what you can do is also affect your sync agent. So you really need to think about when you've created a custom document library, not using the default documents, you then put your folder structure in there. How deep does that go? How big are your actual file names? So you want to kind of minimize those back down. But what you can do is if you had to have a slightly smaller folder structure, you can start using meta tags, and then you can put like a little text in there, for argument's sake, and you can start using this as like a searchable field, and then you can use that up there. So it just means if you have data over multiple document libraries, all with the same, say, project tag, becomes instantly easily searchable, and that gets away from having a deeper file structure and long file names. So I'm just going to paste the link in. This is from Microsoft, sort of denoting what those restrictions are. So I'm just going to paste that down there for you. You can have a little read. Again, these are Microsoft docs, so they might be deemed to be a little bit too technical, like quite technical, but I think you should be able to get the gist of them at least. So that's a nice little gotcha, is don't go deep on your files, on your file structure there. Version tag. So someone come on the previous session regarding minor and major versions, when and when not to use them. Now, the nice thing about versioning is you can base it on a document library. So I would say if you've got a document library, and that's maybe your policies and procedures, you then might want to put in some major and minor versions, because you're going to want to control what version of those documents are out in the wild and what people are using. And the way you can see that is if I go in library settings, go more library settings, we go down and we've got version settings here. Now, the nice thing is because it's per document library, it means you can have a separate document library, say, which is very, very active. Your documents are getting changed all the time. You've got an Excel where people are bouncing in and out of, and you don't want to have that minor version because you might hit this 500 limit, in which case you can't edit that file until you then go in and republish it up to the next version. So it'll be like 1.500, and then you'll have to up it to 2.0. So what you can do, you can just come in here, take that back down to minor, and now back down to major, and now any documents will just increment 1.1, version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4 upwards. So you can customize how you want to use that, which is really, really nice. Again, what I'll do is got a little link here. I'm just going to copy that and I'll get that to the chat for you. Hopefully I'm not spamming you with too many links. One thing to consider, and I see this a lot with SharePoint sites, is your external sharing. Now, a lot of sites I see, unfortunately, just have anyone access. Anyone can share out anonymously. Now, normally what that means is if you then paste the link into your email, you email that out, and that link gets into the wild, for whatever reason, that person's email account gets compromised, anyone can access that data, right? So what I just want to show you is what I think is the best settings that you can have to still give you the flexibility of sharing, but still put a level of protection on your accounts. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to, you do it via the admin center if you haven't done this before. What you want to do is you want to go under policies and sharing, and what you got here is you've got some predefined sharing settings. Now, these particular settings that I've gone for are new and existing guests, and that means they must be a guest or they must provide some sort of verification, right? So normally what that means is when I share a file or a folder to them, they will then get a secondary email to that same account with a little code, and then you have to confirm that code. So you kind of almost two-step in that link. Then if I go down to more external sharing settings, the guest must sign in with the same account that it was shared to, that the invitation was sent to. So they can't then forward that on to someone else to then generate that two-step code. The other nice one I like, we find a lot of sharing links are shared out, you forget about them, and then they just stay there forever. They never expire. For us, that's not a good thing, because you might finish up on a project depending on what you're doing. You never go back in to review it, but yet those links are still active. That data is still accessible by whoever that third party was. So I think it's nice to put a little expiry on there, 365 days in this particular case. Really nice, gets rid of those. And you get notifications on these as well. You get email notifications saying so-and-so is going to lose access in 10 days, 15 days. So good one to have there. And another one I do is just get them to re-authenticate every 30 days, just so to say they have to do a two-step code again, just to make sure that that account is active, that person is still using the data and is still relevant. The next one I do is I only allow them to share to specific people. So you have to be very intentional with your sharing. Yeah, so you have to know who you're sharing it with and intentionally put that email address in there. And then I change the default from edit just to view. Again, sometimes you don't want to be able to edit straight off the bat. So just standard as view off the bat. And then you can give them the rights intentionally again to edit after the fact. So some really good sharing settings there. Of course, you can go full restrictive and only have it internal, but that seems to be a really nice middle ground of still having the flexibility of sharing externally, but then also putting some safety mechanisms in place. I personally don't like anyone anonymous links. I find it just too data, especially if you're sharing data that's GDPR data and stuff like that in, so that's some sharing recommendations. That's what I'd go with. So what's the next one? Very technical one here, I'm afraid. You might not know, and your IT team might know this. If not, we can advise on this. We actually can push some upgrades to your SharePoint, and this is called the SharePoint Starter Kit. And effectively, each element of this SharePoint inside it is called a web part. And what we can do is we can upgrade the underlying SharePoint to include additional web parts. So if I scroll down, you get all these additional upgrades to really better take use of that SharePoint. So we can have banners on there. So you can have rotating banners. You can have a followed site list. You can have quick links. So if you've got a lot of external websites that you use, a lot of partner websites that you might use, then you can have an element in there that has quick links that allows the team to quickly jump in and out of those links itself, and you never forget them. So it's not like you have to worry about people bookmarking them or anything like that. The other thing is you can then also make that site a little bit more personal. So these are very targeted to the individual, and that would be, so you'd have that on the root site, but then if I went into it, I'd only see my stuff, my data. So it makes you a lot more flexible in terms of how you can work with that. Might be better for departmental, to be fair, but the one I really like is tiles. It just makes it very interactive, a lot nicer to look at. It entices people to actually want to use the site a little bit more, to go in and actually get that data, which is, so again, your IT team could advise on this, or else we could advise in terms of potentially doing these upgrades. But the key to taking advantage of this is that you need to have someone who is a SharePoint champion, because you can take SharePoint, you can use it as a very basic file store, without taking advantage of all the additional elements that might provide. But if you really want to turn it into internet, you need to nominate someone internally to want to go in, update all this sample data. So I've still got 5 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I just want to show you, if you haven't seen already, if you are a SharePoint champion, how easy it is to go in and change some elements, right? So I've applied this template to the site. Now I want to go in and start modifying it. So if you've got the rights, you'll need edit rights to do this. You can jump in, hit the edit on the page. And then what that does is that allows me to go in and start now updating the site. So let's say I want to take advantage of some quick links, and actually I know this is just a sample link and I want this to link over to an external website. What I can do is I can go in here, I can click the edit button on it. I can change the URL to where it might be pointing to. So again, this might go to sage.com. It might go to your HR system. It might go to a third-party system that you might use. So I can change the link there, do the SP on it. I can then put some fancy icons. I can use custom images. So again, I can change, go in here, use some stock images that I might want to apply to that. I might want to upload my own images. The other nice thing is all these elements can be moved about. So So you don't have to, and it's all click and drag. So you don't even have to really know any coding to really get advantage of this. It's like, okay, I want my events to take primary spot up the top. So I'm just going to click and drag it up there. So with just a little bit of training and a little bit of knowledge, you can really start taking advantage of your SharePoint to take it more from just a document store and really take it more into an intranet. So there's some real benefits of first getting the template on and then just working from that as a base.